Please pray with me. Gracious and loving God, help us this day to understand and celebrate your dream for the world, to be transformed in Jesus' love, and to use our gifts to make a difference for others. Amen. In the dark days of a corrupt government, in the chaos of leaders seeking personal wealth and power through the exploitation and oppression of the people, when it just seems to get worse, and there is a chaotic feel to everything, when you just don't know who you can trust or what to believe in, because there seems to be no stability, no future to plan for. In these days of King Herod of Judea, the Hebrew nation was an occupied land. Having been run over by the Romans, their king, Herod, was on the Roman payroll. In return for keeping the Hebrew people virtually enslaved. The oppressed, exploited Hebrew people were yearning, praying, crying out, or protesting and rebelling, some seeking violent ways to end this oppression. Breaking into factions and various groups, all seeking a Messiah to set them free. And into this depressed world, to a town outside Galilee, to Nazareth, to a room with a newly engaged young woman, an angel comes. Greetings, favored one. The Lord is with you. And this young woman doesn't scream, run out of the room. She doesn't faint or cry for help. Honestly, she just doesn't seem that surprised. Gabriel says what all messengers of God say, do not be afraid. But she doesn't seem that afraid. Instead, she becomes perplexed and ponders what sort of greeting this might be. To ponder means to think or consider, especially quietly, soberly, deeply. Mary's not reactive. She's taking it all in, taking it in deeply, soberly. She's taking on a posture of receiving this messenger and this message from the eyes and ears of her heart. The heart being that spiritual organ that connects us to God. And thus, being fully present to this experience, she is receptive. So an intimate dialogue takes place. Gabriel delivers the message. You will conceive in your womb and have a son, and his name will be Jesus, which means he who saves. And he's going to be the Messiah from God. Mary asks this question: how can this be? God's messenger explains it. And Mary says to herself, well, here it is. My life is going to be forever changed. She accepts the message. She answers, here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word. Somewhere along the way, maybe through Northern European artworks, or that we only hear this story dramatized to us with our children playing the parts, or maybe it's those Christmas songs. Somehow we have this image that because Mary was young, that Mary was receptive, she was passive. And her "here am I" is somehow submissive, doormatish. Further, somewhere along the way, we've come to think this dialogue is only about, how am I going to get pregnant? When Mary's, how can this be, is asking a bigger question. How is my child going to be the Messiah? What if, unlayered from all those paintings, poems, and songs, Luke is relating the story of a young girl who is not meek, not passive, but quite the opposite? What if she'd been praying for an angel to come to her all along? What if she was praying to God constantly that she would be used to help her people? What if Mary was fierce for God? Mary surrenders over her life to God out of courage, out of conviction, out of wanting to play her part in saving her community. And she's able to do this from a prayer life that led her to be able to hear the message and let it transform her whole life. In saying, yes, here I am. Let it be with me according to God. Not only is she saying yes to becoming pregnant and giving birth, she is saying yes to raising this child with God as God's own. She is agreeing to make her life about working with God to form and inform this child to realize who God has created him to be. Which meant probably going against the system, her family, the cultural expectations of what makes for a successful Hebrew man. Mary is getting the answer to her prayer to be a part in God's movement, to play her part in bringing in God's reign to heal and remake the world. So she is saying yes to parenting this child in such a particular way, to influence this child into being the man who grows up to seek out John to get baptized in the River Jordan. God has favored her to be the influencer, to co-form this child with God. This was the part God wanted her to play in the movement. Think about what we know of early childhood, of the power of parents to form us from the womb on. I was listening to a podcast with Krista Tippett, and she was interviewing Brian Stevenson, the author of Just Mercy. He's a lawyer and a social justice advocate, a founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative, and a law professor at New York University School of Law. And he was in conversation, and he spoke of the great influence his grandmother had on his life's work. And with all his experiences and his Harvard law degree, all the justice work he's done and everything he's seen, it's his grandmother he quotes the most. It's his grandmother he cites constantly. He told the story of when he was just starting out with his Equal Justice Initiative. And his grandmother invited him to her circle of other women friends because Rosa Parks was going to be with them. And she warned him, you can come, but you can't talk. Just listen. And during that afternoon there on the porch, he said she had to keep nudging him and reminding him, just listen. When he was allowed to finally speak to Rosa Parks, he described it that he was so excited to be in her presence that when he finally could tell her what he was up to, he spilled out this rap of everything. All his programs and plans just came out. And Rosa Parks sat there and listened, and then she responded, "So, son, you're doing all that? You're going to be tired, tired, tired." And he said, when his grandmother immediately turned to him and leaned in and said, "That's why you've got to be brave, brave, brave." And Brian Stevenson then said to Krista Tippett, and I'll never forget it, because I do think in many ways what these women taught me was the necessity of courage. If you're going to advance justice, if you're going to be even a complete human being, sometimes it takes courage to love, to just be who you should be to the people you care about. Mary's superpower wasn't her purity or meekness. It was her courage to listen to the message of God's love for her and to let it change her and turn her life upside down. It is what sets her apart. Not because she's the only one to have such a superpower. What stands out is she chose it. She heard the message and she acted. And it sent her to pondering in her heart to find the real answers, to just be who she was, to do what she truly cared about. Instead of setting her apart in art, we need to see how her response shows us what it is to be a complete human being. And to be a complete human being is to receive the message and act. Let it change your life. To be a ponderer, to be who you should be to the people you care about, and especially to those you have trouble caring about. To be a brave lover of God when in contentious conversations of for or against. To be able to respond to the corruption, the pain, the injustices of this world with courageous acts of God's love. To be fierce for love. To be an influencer. To play your part in the movement of God's love expanding into the world. To meet each moment, and especially in these dark days, as complete human beings who receive the message and answer, "Here am I, a servant of God's love."